So the church in South India and the church in North India are taking the questions around eco-theology pretty seriously and having to make a response.
Yes, Church of South India in particular, largely because of this guy, Matthew Koshi. He's getting the young pastors to write eco-theological sermons, write and deliver now. Church of North India, not so much. It's the smaller of the two, funnily enough, because India's population is preponderant mostly in the north. It's a very small minority of the church, and sometimes they just don't have the energy to address questions like eco because their people are just very poor.
One of the most important priorities for world Methodism is thinking about eco-theology and the actions that arise out of the emerging theology.
Yep.
And we get a lot of different kind of emphasis from different regions in the world around that.
Yep.
That
Yep.
for some, it's very much a justice issue. For others, it's much more about the nature of God.
Yep. Yep.
There's quite different emphases. You see a lot of that global perspective, and you've done training in the US, and you're still in contact with the church in Sweden, and you see a lot of those different things. Where do we sit here in Australia?
In the Uniting Church, it seems to be being packaged with the justice stuff at the moment, and I'm a wee bit concerned about that. I mean, it is. It's that story about the sector theologies that have developed since the end of the Second World War, and liberation theology and feminist theology, and so on and so forth. And this stands as the next in line in those. Eco-theology gives us the chance to have another look at systematic theology, really.
Yeah, doctrine of creation.
Yeah. I worry that we're not doing enough of that. I'm encouraged by talking with my colleagues in other denominations, predominantly the Anglicans. With the Anglicans, you've got to try and, I feel, speak their language. So I have to be ready to discuss biblically what's going on here and why we feel the Bible supports this view of this thing that isn't just about believing in Jesus and repenting and praying for forgiveness of sins, going up to heaven. If you can do that, you get a long way with the Anglicans, at least, the Sydney Anglicans, I think. Uniting tends to hop over at least the Sydney Anglicans and have a lot more to do with the Catholics. There's, in particular, one group called Faith and Ecology Network, and there's some lovely Catholics, nuns and priests, and so lovely. They just a couple of weeks before we went to India in 2013, they took me out to dinner. It was just lovely. One of the things that surprised me initially was that there are a number of Orthodox Christians and Egyptian Copts, and I think also who are thinking very hard about eco-theology and those sorts of issues.
I actually met Pope Francis very soon after Laudate Si was published, and I was responsible for collating the gift that the World Methodists were going to give Pope Francis. So we actually did a collection of songs from around the world around creation. And I presented that in a beautiful photo book with photos from different parts of the world. Because of that, ever since, I've been very conscious about how's it going with Laudate Si all over the place. You know, how are Catholics travelling with this emphasis on rethinking praise of God the Creator? And it just seems to me like they've had year-long focus on that. They've had studies that everybody's done. They've had lots of little goals that are for every household in many parts of the world. When I see that level of whole church commitment to modifying an encultured behaviour to form new forms of behaviour, I think we haven't begun to think about those strategies.
No.
So I wonder, if we were to do that, what would we do?
Yeah. My last congregation at Normanhurst is intensely practical. That's what our culture goes to first. We need to be theological. the minister in the congregation is not theological, then who will be? And if the congregation is not theological in society, then who's going to be theological? And that, I think, also pertains to eco-theology stuff. Pertains to everything. We're supposed to be the theological thinkers of the community. I think that's very important.